What would you say would be the biggest risks in going down the self-managed super fund route from an investment perspective for property?
From an investment perspective, I've touched on it before. Liquidity risk is the big one. Just running out of cash, not being able to put more cash towards it. You've got a property outside in your personal name that needs repairs and all these other things. That's easy enough. You can just pay for that and you're done and dusted. So the big risk there, is not having money to pay for things. The other big one, which comes up all the time, and is probably the biggest risk, to be honest, is just the legislation risk, because every time there's an election or something's happening, superannuation comes back onto the table. So, there is an incentive for the government, a pretty big incentive, to have people fund their own retirements, because, their bill for funding pensions and everything like that is huge. So they do want people to self-fund in retirement, but they also use super as a weapon to get votes. So they're chopping and changing the laws all the time. Like, there hasn't been 1 year where nothing has changed, like nothing's not changed.
It's such a tricky one to think about. Like, if you're 30 and you're like, all right, I'm going to just really go and start trying to do some self-managed super stuff and build out that, right? Really focus on it. And you decide to contribute more through, your 30s, 40s, than maybe in your 50s and your 60s. And then you get to a position where, like, I want to retire at like 60 or 65 and pull that money out. And they go, oh, hang on, it's an extra 10 years now. Like, there's a big risk there. There's a massive risk for people to consider, right? Yeah,
absolutely. You don't know what that's going to change to. They've already changed, the rules on the preservation age, because you used to be able to access your super fund balance if you had retired by, 50, 58. And then based on your age, they've scaled that up, and then to 60 now. So, that's sort of changed. The retirement age, I think, for the age pension, that used to be, 65, now that's 67. There's all these things that are changing. You just don't know 30 years down the line. Like, look at what they've done. They announced the other day, anyone with a balance of 3 mil or over now has to pay tax, or they're proposing this anyway, potentially pay tax at 30% instead of 15%. So that's already going to cost people with a balance that big. That's like they've predicted on average about 80 grand is what it's going to cost people just to have that tax bill, just because some, governments decided to change that rule. So there is a big risk with what's set up now, may not be what happens down the line. And the big thing now with it all is that everything's tax-free when you reach retirement and start drawing down all that income. Dividends, all the capital gains, everything's tax-free in that environment, like once you've retired. So, you don't want to get to the end of the road there and then they've changed the rules and then it's just not viable.
Diversification is so key, right? Like, it's building your wealth in super and outside of super. Outside, you've probably got a little bit more control from government regulations, you'd think. But, you never know, right? Like, they're always chopping and changing, giving you incentives to extract your cash out of your super. Remember that with the COVID? People pulled, we had $20,000 out of their super, and it's like, well, you're actually robbing from your future self just to pay for. I had my wife's friends pulled them out for a personal surgery to make her look better, in one way, which she was beautiful as it is. Me too.
My neighbour took out, I think, 10,000 and bought a bunch of surfboards. They just loaded up, and I think they put the numbers out there. They were saying, I can't remember exactly what it was. It might have been like every $5,000 you pull out, or every $10,000 was costing you $130,000 by retirement. Obviously at certain ages and things like that. That was, a pretty crazy rule that I doubt we'll see again.